I wanted to talk to you briefly about today is just some creative solutions that are being adopted around the world with respect to water as a place. So first of all, who's heard of the Plus Pool project in New York? We're currently working on a project in New York where they use crowdsourcing funding to do a feasibility study for treating water from the Brooklyn River through a filtration system and putting it in a floating pool. Now the reason for this project was that essentially the government wants to clean up the Brooklyn River. They realised it was going to be a huge task that was going to take years to get underway, but they wanted to raise public awareness. So this study was undertaken, the crowdsourcing funding paid for all of it through a website, and there was so much interest and so much passion about it from the community that once they worked out that it was feasible and viable, they then decided to open up the crowdsourcing to fund the capital costs for the project. So in New York, the public has now raised the entire funds required to put in a 100 metre by 100 metre plus shaped pool, floating pool in the Brooklyn River. So we're in the process of finalising the design for it, and there will be a floating pool sitting in New York River that the government hasn't had to pay for. People want to be part of the solution. The second example, Songdo in Korea. So many of you will have been to cities around Asia and noticed that many of them have huge traffic problems, huge pollution problems, and aren't necessarily always a nice place to be in. Songdo in Korea, we've been working with the government over there to use water to create a place. So there's a seawater canal that's been constructed through the middle of this city, and stormwater harvesting is used to irrigate all of that green space throughout the middle of the city to turn it into a place that people want to be in. We've really helped to transform a city to make it a place that people can engage in and enjoy. Wenzhou National Wetland Park. Just wanted to briefly talk about this. In China, they're actually moving away from the point of trying to separate people from water to try and bring them together. So this wetland area has been used and turned into a prime real estate area where they've planned around the 100-year storm, and they've designed high-profile residential dwellings and business dwellings, business locations throughout this development. So we're moving to a place in the world where we're connecting with water, not being separate from it. Bradford Square in the UK. So if you look at this photo that you can see in your slides, in Bradford Square, it was it had become one of the working class towns of the UK. No one wanted to go into that area at night because it was basically full of crime. There were traffic problems, etc. It was run down, and most of the businesses located around the town square were vacant. They weren't able to lease out the property. An architect came along and developed up a solution looking at water being adopted in the town square to transform it, and they came up with a whole lot of space-age buildings. Now we then worked with them to look at making that a more shallow pond where people could access it. You look at the Y-shaped area through there. That's areas where people could walk through this water, and said, rather than putting in new buildings, why don't you use your old buildings and use them as a source of pride, as heritage space. So essentially, what I wanted to do is just show you how you can use water to transform a public area. So you can see the lighting, the water features. The value of the property around this town square went up over tenfold. It's all fully leased now. The highest fountain in Europe, all from stormwater harvesting schemes. So it's all recycled water, lit up at night. It looks amazing. They had 20,000 people at the opening in a town centre that no one wanted to be in. We can transform our cities, we can transform our towns by using water. But rather than just show examples from around the world, I wanted to quickly say, look, we are doing this in Australia as well, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to apply it here. In the height of the drought in Melbourne, they realised that the MCG and also Melbourne Olympic Park were two of the top 100 water users in Melbourne. So we worked with them to look at adopting some decentralised schemes, a sewer mining scheme and a stormwater harvesting scheme to reuse water and save a lot of the heritage listed trees around Yarra Park, around the MCG, and also ensure that the green space could be kept around both of those areas, which are two of the world's premier sporting locations. So this is a photo of the stormwater harvesting scheme at Melbourne Park. This is the MCG sewer mining scheme. Now, the other reason I wanted to raise this is you can see the two glass boxes in your photos, but they're for the lift shafts for the MCG, but the rest of it's buried. Now, there were some reasons why they did that in terms of heritage, but the thing I always wanted to see happen, and I think will happen in the future as we value water more, is why didn't we put the stadium above the ground, put a glass box around it and celebrate it? Because that treatment plant has been used to save a park. This is just a diagram to show where the schemes are in the top, up the top of the screens, the sewer mining scheme, which irrigates all of Yarra Park, toilet flushing for the MCG and washdown. Down the bottom left-hand corner is the Melbourne Park stormwater harvesting scheme, which provides irrigation and toilet flushing for Melbourne Park Tennis Centre. Some of the things Australia is doing are best practice. So that MCG sewer mining scheme was then used for the London Olympics, and they took the treatment technology, they took the process and applied it there, and we now have the biggest recycled water network in Europe, in London, which was used to keep all of the parkland irrigated around the London Olympics area. So we can learn from one another, we can share knowledge around the world to adopt best practice. And finally, Melbourne Outfall sewer. It was an old disused sewer that was basically 120 years old, 25 kilometres from the city in Melbourne out to Werribee treatment plant, and Melbourne Water didn't know what to do with it. So we worked with them to create a vision where they use that for recycled water in a linear parkway with cycleways, running tracks, etc., turning an asset which had a barbed wire around it and wasn't being used and creating a vision where it became a public amenity. So we can use water to create value. We've talked a lot earlier tonight about, and I'm going to flick through this video because, if I can, we've talked a lot tonight about recycling of water, we've talked about water-sensitive urban design, we've talked about all the different amazing things that can be done. But what I wanted to just leave home with, the message I wanted to leave with you before you go into these sessions now is, water's not just about pipes and pits and supply and taking away our wastewater to get rid of it. Water is something that we should value as a city. Water is something that we should value as people. And water changes the environment that we live in. We can see what's being done in Korea. We can see how people are valuing it in New York. We can see what it's done for Bradford Square. How do we use water to create a legacy in our city? How do we use water to be something that actually inspires us and creates places that we enjoy? So what I wanted to just leave you with the question is, what is our legacy going to be for Sydney? Thank you.